guys, it's Lindsay. Welcome back to The Wandering Reader. Today I'm going to be doing my February book wish list. This is a series of videos that I started on my channel to let you guys know all of the books that I added to my Amazon wish list in the past month. So I have 16 books to talk to you about today, so let's jump into the first book. The first book that I want to talk about is called The Cactus, and this is by Sarah Haywood, and I heard about this book on Jess Miglin's Books I'm Excited For in 2018 video that she did. And what intrigued me about this is that it's a debut novel, and it's been compared to Eleanor Oliphant and The Rosie Project, and I loved both of those books. So we seem to have a very similar main character who likes to have control in her life, and then things go on in the novel which means that she loses some of that control. So I'm really interested to see how this one turns out. The next book that I want to talk about is called The Summer I Saved the World in 65 Days by Michelle Weber Hurwitz, and I heard about this on Lizzie Faye Loves Books Favourite Books of 2017 video. What I quite liked about this is that it seems to be a YA novel, and I'll just read you a little paragraph from the synopsis. It says, "This summer Nina decides to change things. She hatches a plan. There are 65 days of summer. Every day she'll anonymously do one small but remarkable good thing for someone in her neighbourhood and find out, does doing good actually make a difference? Along the way she discovers that her neighbourhood and her family are full of surprises and secrets. In this big-hearted, sweetly romantic novel, things may not turn out exactly as Nina expects. They might be better." So I just think that whole concept sounds really sweet. It'd be a good book to pick up in the summer, and Elizabeth really liked it, like I said. Next up, also on Elizabeth's Favourite Books of 2017 list, is a book called The Kitchen House, and this is by Kathleen Grissom. I'd heard about this on quite a few people's channels and just hadn't added it to my wish list, so after hearing Elizabeth talk about it I finally did. And this is, I believe, about a little girl called Lavinia who is an orphan, and she's shipped over to America to work in the kitchen of a plantation, I think in Virginia, and she encounters, you know, a new way of life over there, and then she comes to you know, build relationships with some of the slaves that work in the house as well, and it's kind of that clash of cultures and that sort of idea. And I've been loving books like that lately. I read Yellow Crocus and really enjoyed it. I'll leave a link to the review I did of that, so I'm really interested to read books that are very similar to that too. The next book that I want to talk about is called Fever, and this is by Dion Meyer, and I heard about this from Kirsty from Ravenclaw Reading Room. She is doing one of those what I read in 2018 lists on Twitter, and she put this down as one of the books that obviously she's read, and she said this was a really great thriller, and it seems to be about a world where a virus has wiped out most of the population, and then this particular book is set in South Africa and is following a man and his son as they try to survive in this kind of new world. So I really like post-apocalyptic books, and it's quite interesting that it has a South African setting, so yeah, I added that to my wish list too. The next book that I want to talk about is called Long Way Down, and this is by Jason Reynolds, and I heard about this from Emily over at Possibly Lit, and she added this to her February TBR, and I believe this is a very recent release. And the way she described it is that it's set in a lift, and the story takes place over the course of a ride down in the lift, and it focuses around a teenager whose brother has been shot, and I believe that he gets in the lift in order to get revenge on whoever shot his brother, and then as we go down we get details of what happens and things like that, and I just found that kind of premise of it being set in a lift really interesting, so I added it to my wish list. The next book that I want to talk about is called Are You There Alone? The Unspeakable Crime of Andrea Yates by Suzanne O'Malley, and I heard about this from Karen over at Rather Be Reading, and she talked about this in one of her reading vlogs, I think the one she did right at the beginning of February, and this is a non-fiction book that describes the crimes of Andrea Yates, and I believe she killed all 5 of her children, and then it is sort of talking about the crime and some of the psychology behind it, and I believe Karen listened to this on Audio and said a lot of good things about it, so I really do like a lot of true crime, so I added this to my list too. The next book that I want to talk about is The Lines We Cross, and this is by Randa Abdul Fattah, and Ali from Books on My Social Life recommended this in his contemporary recommendations video. And this is a book that I believe is set in Australia and follows two teenagers, one who is well established in Australia, has lived there for a long time, and his dad belongs to an anti-immigrant group. And then you've got the other one, I think her name's Mina, and she has just recently moved to Australia from Afghanistan, and the two of them meet and I think form some sort of a relationship, and it's about obviously the two cultures coming together and the clash with his dad and his views and things like that. And Ali really had fantastic things to say about it and said that lots more people should read it, so I added it to my list. The next book that I want to talk about is called Binti, and this is by Nnedi Okorafor. And I heard about this from Aprilius Maximus, and she talked about this in her January wrap-up. And in fact, she talked about all three of the books in the trilogy. And I had heard about this before, but I hadn't added it to my wish list until I heard April talk about it. And this is basically a science fiction book that is set, I think, in space and follows African characters. I think that's the premise behind it, and she raved about the whole trilogy, so I thought I would add it to my list too. Next up I want to talk about Things a Bright Girl Can Do, and this is by Sally Nichols, and I heard about this from Simon over at Savage Reads, and he hauled it in his recent February book haul part 1. And the premise of this sounds really good, so I'm going to read you the description. It says, through rallies and marches, in polite drawing rooms and freezing prison cells and the poverty-stricken slums of the East End, 3 courageous young women joined the fight for the vote. Evelyn is 17, and though she's rich and clever, she may never be allowed to follow her older brother to university. Enraged that she's expected to marry her childhood sweetheart rather than be educated, she joins the suffragettes and vows to pay the ultimate price for women's freedom. May is 15 and already sworn to the cause, though she and her fellow suffragettes refuse violence. When she meets Nell, a girl who's grown up in hardship, she sees a kindred spirit. Together and in love, the two girls start to dream of a world where all kinds of women have their place. But the fight for freedom will change Evelyn, May and Nell more than they could ever believe. As war looms, just how much are they willing to sacrifice? So it's a really timely book, just because obviously we're celebrating the centenary of, you know, women gaining the right to vote. And also it seems to have some LGBTQ plus themes in it as well, and it just sounded really, really fantastic, so I added it to my list. The next book that I want to talk about is called Wildflower Hill, and this is by Kimberly Freeman. And I don't really know anything about this book, but Goodreads recommended it after I finished The Light Between Oceans. And it's another book set in Australia, and I've said before that I really like books set in Australia, so I thought I would add it to my list and just kind of find out what it's all about from there. The next book that I want to talk about is called The Darkest Sunrise, and this is by Ali Martinez, and Lisa from Books and Smiles recommended this in her favourite love stories book recommendations video. And I don't know anything about this, but this one, the way that she described it really appealed to me, and she said it was a good ride, and there are 2 books I think in this series, so it's nice and easy to finish off, so I thought I'd add it to my list as well. And the final book that I want to talk about today is called Dragon Springs Road, and this is by Janie Chang. And in my last book wishlist video, my January one, I talked about a book called 3 Souls by Janie Chang, and then one of my subscribers said that she'd read this book by her and really, really enjoyed it, so I thought I would add it to my list as well. Again, I don't really know much about it, but she had great things to say, so I thought I would add that to my wishlist too. So there you go guys, they were all the books that I added to my wish list in February. I'd love to have a chat with you in the comments below. Have you read any of these and what did you think of them, and have you got any other recommendations for me? Thanks very much for watching, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye.